What ultimately is the Dallas Cowboys' greatest need at this point in the offseason? That's the question guiding today's analysis. A true snapshot of the roster exactly as it is before free agency and official roster moves completely change the landscape. This isn't about discussing the owner or general manager, although that conversation always comes up, but rather about looking directly at the field, the contracts, who might leave, who might stay, and where the team's weaknesses actually lie right now. It's a snapshot of the present, knowing that taking on returns can be costly in the NFL and that this list will inevitably change in the coming weeks. Before we continue, take this opportunity to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment on what you think is the biggest weakness the Dallas Cowboys are currently facing. This interaction is crucial to strengthening the discussion and understanding how the fans perceive this decisive moment for the franchise, especially in an offseason that promises significant changes. The starting point for this evaluation involves positions that aren't top long-term priorities, but still require attention. Quarterback, for example, isn't a structural necessity. The organization remains committed to developing Joe Milton as a backup option behind Dak Prescott, but the situation still allows for the arrival of another player to complete the group, even if it's just for adding depth to the roster or practice squad, especially with Will Greer's uncertain future after his contract expires. It's not a red flag, but it's a position that can't be completely ignored. Next, a tight end position emerges as a specific need for depth. Currently, the team has Jake Ferguson, Brevin Spann-Ford, and Luke Schoonmaker as clear options. However, the absence of Princeton Fant and the departure of Ronald Farweather reduced the safety margin, especially considering the preseason and fatigue throughout the season. The understanding is clear. There is no expectation of heavy investment here unless an exceptional value emerges. The most logical path involves late draft picks or undrafted players to complete the group. The same reasoning applies to the kicker position, traditionally undervalued, but which is now on the radar due to contractual issues. Brandon Aubrey is a restricted free agent, and the tendency is to apply the second-round tender while working on a long-term agreement. The impact on the salary cap wouldn't be as aggressive as other positions, and yet there's the strategic consideration. If a team offers a high draft pick for a kicker, it could become an opportunity to strengthen a defense that clearly needs more resources. When the focus shifts to the offensive line, the discussion gains weight. Today, there's a functional starting five on the field, but everything revolves around Terrence Steele's future. The decision to keep him, cut him, or trade him has a direct impact on the ranking of needs. His high cap hit generates debate, especially considering the amount of new money not yet paid and the dead money involved. A cut after June 1st doesn't free up the money immediately, but it helps fund the draft class and opens up space for other moves. Depending on this choice, the offensive line may remain a depth adjustment or become a more relevant need, even if not necessarily requiring elite investment. Furthermore, the roster includes important names under contract, such as Tyler Smith, as well as young players who need to stay healthy and more experienced players whose future is still uncertain, such as Brock Hoffman and Robert Jones. The expectation is that some will return in specific roles, while others may allow for minor adjustments. Everything depends on the central decision involving Steele, which ultimately proves to be a turning point in this analysis. On defense, the cornerback position is emerging as a growing concern. There's talent under contract, but also many questions. Darren Bland's health is critical, and there are young players who can compete, but the consensus is that they should be vying for deeper roster spots, not assuming starting responsibilities. Even with potential veteran returns, the feeling is that the team does need a cornerback with starting status to elevate the level of the unit and provide more stability to the secondary. This same logic extends to other defensive positions and even to the offense, such as wide receiver and running back, which appear as conditional needs. In the case of receivers, everything revolves around George Pickens' contractual situation. Until his renewal or franchise tag is defined, there is a technical void on paper. The internal expectation is that he will stay, which would cause this need to plummet on the list, since the offensive production remained competitive even with an extremely vulnerable defense. The running back position follows the same pattern. The current status highlights the position because the main players are free agents, but the clear trend is the renewal of Javonte Williams, whose performance has been pleasing and whose return would push this need to a secondary level, allowing almost total focus on the defense. With these renewals, the roster composition changes completely and reveals where the biggest structural problems actually lie. Once the contract situations of George Pickens and Javonte Williams are resolved, the roster landscape changes, significantly and almost automatically. What remains in the Dallas Cowboys offseason picture is a team whose urgency is primarily focused on the defensive side of the ball. And it is precisely there that the analysis takes on a harsher, more direct, and inevitable tone. Regardless of who the new defensive coordinator will be, the need for change is clear, especially in the center of the defense. The linebacker position exposes one of the biggest weaknesses of the current roster. There is talent, but a lack of reliability. Marvin Overshown is seen as a player with potential, but his recent injury history prevents him from being considered a safe solution to assume an immediate leading role. The tendency is for him to be used as a complementary option, not as a pillar of the unit. Other names in the group have not delivered sufficient performance to justify full confidence. Some should leave the roster, others are still in the development stage and cannot be launched as starters without risk. Within this scenario, the internal assessment is objective. The team needs 2 linebackers with starting profiles. One more experienced player, capable of leading from the first snap, and another young player, chosen early in the draft, to grow within the system. This is not a luxury, it is a basic necessity within the Cowboys' defense rebuild process. If the linebacker position is already a concern, the edge rusher situation raises the alert level to the maximum. Today, the roster has very few pass rushers under contract, and recent performance has shown that the current group has not been enough to consistently pressure opposing quarterbacks. The lack is both in quality and quantity. There is a desire to bring back a veteran who offers stability and experience, but this is far from solving everything. What is emerging is the need to add multiple pieces, starters, and rotation players, creating real competition for spots and depth throughout the season. Within the Cowboys. Roster needs scenario. The edge rusher position appears as the most critical point in the short and medium term. Interestingly, while some areas suffer from shortages, others experience the opposite effect. The defensive tackle position, for example, doesn't appear to be a priority at the moment. There are several names under contract, which even creates a feeling of excess. This doesn't prevent occasional adjustments, whether with undrafted players or late picks, but there's no real urgency for significant investments there. In terms of Cowboys' draft priorities, defensive tackle is far from being the initial focus. When you look at the roster as a whole, it becomes clear that many decisions are less about available talent and more about resource management. The impact of contracts, cuts, and renewals directly shapes the list of needs. Terrence Steele's case illustrates this precisely. The debate surrounding his cap hit is not just technical, it's strategic. A potential cut completely alters the financial planning, influences draft decisions, and can enable important defensive reinforcements. This type of choice shows how Terrence Steele's cap hit goes far beyond the offensive line and affects the project as a whole. Speaking of the offensive line, it continues to be observed cautiously, but without the sense of urgency that dominates other positions. There are defined starters and young players in development, and the most likely path involves specific adjustments depending on contractual decisions. Within the context of the Cowboys' offensive line, the issue is more about balance and depth than rebuilding. The secondary also demands constant attention. Even with players under contract, the lack of reliable cornerback depth keeps the position in the spotlight. Internal competition is expected, but the overall assessment points to the need to add someone capable of assuming a significant role early on. This point reinforces the debate about Cowboys' cornerback depth and how it directly impacts defensive consistency. Safety follows a similar logic. There are available names, but the absence of a clearly above-average player limits the sector's potential. Internal analysis suggests the search for at least one new starter, someone who will raise the level of the group and organize the defense in critical situations. Within the Cowboys' safety needs, this search for immediate impact becomes one of the central themes of the offseason. On offense, with the likely renewal of Pickens and Williams' contracts, the urgent needs decrease drastically. The receiving core is once again seen as a strength, provided George Pickens' contract is resolved, and the backfield gains stability with Williams' continued presence, reinforcing the Cowboys' well-defined running back strategy. This frees up resources and attention for where it really hurts: the defense. The final picture of this analysis is not about pessimism, but about clarity. The Dallas Cowboys offseason is shaping up to be a decisive period where misjudgments can be costly in a season that demands an immediate response. The Cowboys' free agency decisions, coupled with their draft picks, need to reflect exactly this diagnosis. The team knows where its problems lie. The question now is how it will address them within the context of the NFL Cowboys 2025, balancing urgency, planning, and execution.